Let's be honest. If you're online at all, you are seeing a non-stop flood of information about GLP-1 drugs like Ozempic and Wegovy. And that conversation is, well, it's loud, it's confusing, and it's full of extremes.
The whole debate seems to boil down to this one simple question. Are these drugs a true medical miracle, completely changing the game for diabetes and obesity? Or are they a menace, hiding some really serious dangers?
Because on one hand, your social media feeds are just packed with these incredible, life-changing success stories.
But then, on the other hand, you see these absolutely terrifying headlines about severe, debilitating side effects. It's just a constant emotional whiplash. Okay, so it is time to cut through all of that. To get to the truth, we have to move past the stories, past the hype. We need to look at the hard evidence. And to do that, we have to be really specific about the kind of information we're going to use. We're going to filter out all that noise by focusing only on the highest quality data, the data that comes in after a drug is approved and is being used by millions of people in the real world. And that's called real-world evidence, or RWE. Now, this isn't data from a small, perfectly controlled clinical trial. No. RWE comes from the messy reality of millions of electronic health records and insurance claims, showing us exactly how these drugs perform in huge, diverse populations over very long periods of time. So that was our mission. We reviewed hundreds of these post-approval sources, from massive patient registries to regulatory reviews. And then we did the math. We took those complex statistics, like relative risk, and converted them into simple, absolute numbers you can actually wrap your head around to understand the real-world impact.
All right, so let's open the ledger and see what that real-world data actually says, starting with the clearest signals on the risk side of the equation.
The first really clear signal is for biliary disease, and specifically gallstones. Now, this risk seems to get worse with higher doses, and, this is a key point, it's also amplified by rapid weight loss itself, which, is a known risk factor for gallstones no matter how you lose the weight.
So how do we quantify that risk? Well, that's where this number comes in. This is the number needed to harm, or NNH. It means that for every 111 people taking Wegovy for about a year and a half, we'd expect one extra person to get gallstones compared to a group taking a placebo. See? It turns a vague percentage into a real-world headcount. All right, let's move on to those widely reported severe stomach issues like gastroparesis, which you've probably heard called stomach paralysis, where the stomach just empties way too slowly.
So a big 2023 study in JAMA found a higher relative risk for these rare events when compared to another weight loss drug. But when we calculated the absolute risk, it translates to about 4 to 7 extra cases of gastroparesis for every 1,000 patients treated for a full year. So while the risk is definitely real, the absolute numbers confirm it's still uncommon. And it's also really important to remember these are signals from a single observational study, and those can have limitations.
Okay. Now for pancreatitis, that's inflammation of the pancreas. This was a major concern early on with these drugs. So what does the bigger body of real-world evidence tell us now?
And this slide perfectly illustrates that whole signal versus noise problem. I mean, early reports showed a terrifying 9-fold increase in risk. But as we got better and better data from these huge real-world studies, that signal started to fade. The largest, most recent analyses have found no significant increase in pancreatitis risk compared to other modern diabetes drugs. The noise got quieter, and the signal all but disappeared.
Next up is the thyroid cancer concern. Now, this was serious enough that it led to the FDA's strongest warning, a boxed warning right on the drug's label. So, this all started with studies in rodents. But then, a huge multi-country human study published in the BMJ in 2023 was incredibly reassuring. It found no increased risk. So what's going on? Well, the most likely explanation seems to be something called detection bias. As a later JAMA study suggested, doctors who knew about that warning were just screening their GLP-1 patients more carefully, so they were finding more hidden, pre-existing cancers, which created the illusion of a new risk.
Okay, let's turn the page to the other side of the ledger. Because the real-world data doesn't just show risks, it confirms some seriously powerful benefits, especially for your heart.
A large Danish registry study published in The Lancet did a head-to-head comparison of GLP-1s with another class of diabetes drugs, and what they found was that over 3.5 years, patients taking GLP-1s had a 2.5% absolute reduction in major cardiac events like heart attacks and strokes, and a 2.5% absolute reduction in death from any cause.
And that brings us to this crucial number. This is the number needed to treat, or NNT. It's the flip side of what we saw before. It means we would only need to treat 41 patients with a GLP-1 instead of the other drug to prevent one major cardiovascular event or death over that time frame. That is a really powerful and clinically meaningful benefit.
So understanding the numbers is one part of the story. But understanding when these risks and benefits typically show up helps put everything into an even clearer perspective. As you can see from this timeline, the most common side effects, the nausea and stuff, they tend to happen right away, within days or weeks of starting or upping the dose. Some of the rarer, more serious risks might appear within weeks to months. But those major, life-saving cardiovascular and kidney benefits, those are earned over months and years of being on the treatment.
So, after reviewing all this real-world evidence, after trying to separate that signal from the noise, what's the bottom line?
Well, we can actually sort the data into these pretty clear categories. You've got your established, common risks like GI issues and gallstones. Then you have rare but real signals for things like severe gastroparesis. And then you have those early, scary signals for things like pancreatitis and thyroid cancer that have gotten much weaker or have faded away as we've gotten better data. And on the plus side, you have powerful, established protections for the heart and kidneys, right alongside that sustained weight loss.
Now, of course, none of this is medical advice, but separating the real, established signals from all that background noise allows for a much clearer, more productive conversation. The whole goal here was to arm you with the real-world numbers so you can move beyond the headlines and have a truly informed discussion with your doctor about what's right for your own personal health.